I'm taking a piece of my binding and just snipping off an end. I have a lot of extras, so this little piece of binding is going to show me where I'm going to be trimming off my excess to make my miter. I'm penning it in the middle of my open area. I just put a flathead pen on either side of my binding trim. This works with any width binding. And then you can remove it once you have your pins in place. Make sure your quilt is very flat and your binding is very flat with no wrinkles. From the right hand side of your binding, you're going to trim to the leftmost pin, and then from the left hand side of your binding, you're going to trim to the rightmost pin. Be careful that you're not trimming through both layers of binding when you trim. If you're worried about trimming too much, you can always use a marker and mark and then cut. Now I'm going to prepare to sew my miter together. I lay out my two pieces flat and I kind of fold my quilt over itself. Make sure right sides are together. And you just want to match the corner up so that it forms like an L shape, a 90-degree L. And I use 2 pins. Now my little miter area is ready, and I'm going to be sewing from corner to corner, just along that line right there. You can also mark this with another pencil if you wish to have a more guided area to sew. I just sew from corner to corner. Just a regular 2.5 stitch is fine. It's 2.5 length stitch. Remove your pins as you go. And now once you've sewn it, you can test it out. Make sure you don't have any twists in your binding, because that's often a common mistake whenever people first start mitering bindings. They'll have a twist in it. My binding lays flat, everything looks good, the join looks good. So now I can go ahead and trim away the excess. I don't have to fiddle with it anymore. If for some reason you messed up, you could just use a seam ripper and redo that seam. But I'm ready to go ahead and finish off my binding now. I'm going to press this seam open so that it lays super flat. I'm just finger pressing here to get it ready for the iron. Press it nice and flat, and then go ahead and put it back into place where you're going to be sewing it down and press it. This creates a really nice fold, so it's nice and flat whenever you go to sew it down. Knock your camera around a little bit, and then you're just going to be sewing it down into place. You'll see me, I move my needle back to where I was sewing on the binding before. So if you adjusted your needle to a specific width for your binding, remember to move it back there before you start sewing. And then finish off sewing your binding down to the quilt. Start a little bit before and end a little bit after where your original binding seam started, just to make sure it's extra secure. And once you've done all of that, then your binding is finished and you've mitered it. And you can test the join and make sure everything looks good. And everything looks nice and secure. And I'm just trimming off a little bit of thread. But my miter looks great. Folds over, no bulk. ready to hand stitch to the back of the quilt now.